mental health it's all holistic. There is no, I'm going to tell people who are listening, it's like, once you exhaust drugs and alcohol, having fun and shit like that, you got to start meditating and trying all this other crap. Nothing else works anymore.
You need new solutions. You need new solutions.
And one of them is, kind of accepting that everything is all, consciousness is a holistic unification of like our body and our mind.
Health is an industrial band from LA that has been making the soundtrack to a dystopian future apocalypse since 2005.
This is an experience of the void.
Welcome to Occupy the Void. My name's Christina. I'm here with Jake from Health. You've made a lot of really special music that I think harkens back to my first love, which is industrial music, harkens back to something that is now current and being exploited in new ways. And it's about like aggression and emotion more than anything else. And your voice is something that I think there's something about like the vulnerability of the voice being surrounded by a fortress of music that is really soothing. And this show's all about mental health. So what has been the feedback like from people about how your music has affected their mental health?
It's been an interesting evolution in terms of that. And when you get into heavy music, there's a lot of people that are just lifelong fans, and that's what they actually love.
It's part of their heart and soul.
Yeah, and they're not trying to trade that in.
Yeah.
There might be, and I think that once we started kind of connecting with that fan base more and maybe leaning in on the music being a little bit more openly emotional in terms of the lyrical content, that's when we started getting a lot more feedback about mental health. So little by little, it kind of started being like, oh, this record helped me through a really difficult winter, or telling me, or us getting feedback online, like I was feeling suicidal and it helped me to get past that. And at first that's like a little difficult to process.
Yeah.
Because it feels like kind of a responsibility.
Yeah.
Even though it's not expressed that way.
Yeah.
And then I think as we became more comfortable with it, I kind of, things that I go through, I think I realized that the listeners were resonating with those same things.
Yeah.
So that it was therapeutic for me in being able to understand that I was communicating something that they wanted to hear.
It mirrored.
Which of course, like, then there's a reciprocity that is therapeutic for, it's not just them. It's like, then I have something that I can say that I sort of need to say.
Yeah.
And it's not just like a tree falling in a forest.
It's real. Yeah. And that's kind of the beautiful thing about music.
Yeah.
How has making music saved you? You've been doing this for 20 years almost.
Yeah, almost.
Which is kind of wild, dude.
Yeah, it's a long
And
time.
especially with the same people, like obviously Jupiter left, but but that's a really important relationship. How have you guys affected your mental health, the relationship you've built?
I mean, that's I guess a very complicated question, considering that it's hard for me to unpack what my life would be like without the band.
Yeah.
I think that my relationship with music and mental health has taken on a more technicolor kind of center frame role in my life, like especially like pandemic on.
Yeah, right.
I just personally had I have myriad mental health issues.
Me too.
And
that's the reason why I do the show.
Yeah, and so that's why I make music.
Yeah, word.
And
they're good, aren't they?
But when I was younger, I think I was able to mask some of that with like, there's a lot of substantial functionality to being like young and feeling like, even when you feel really down, I could drink a lot or do a lot of drugs and still have that be kind of what I needed to keep me on an even keel.
Yeah,
and then if I like went too far with it, I could stop for a while and then like right the ship.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then when I got older, it became more and more difficult to right the ship. And then I had to eventually stop. And then when I stopped, I had this sort of clear-headedness that really, really reduced a lot of my like depression and anxiety symptoms.
It's real.
And then it all came back, and I didn't have drugs and alcohol as a way to cope with it anymore. So it's like all of a sudden you're like fucking like sober on a date,
Yeah.
and it's your life, and you're just
What's
like,
it called? Raw dogging life.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I became a father right before the pandemic happened.
That's
and so I was
wild.
like trapped in a house. So I really hate like being trite or cliched, but you know, like I cannot imagine surviving that period of time without. I had to write music all the time, even though I wasn't
That's
sleeping.
beautiful.
Like when
Yeah.
he went to bed, when my son went to bed, it was like, I don't think it's going to be sufficient for me to watch a Netflix show. Like I have to get some sort of catharsis
For your
out.
soul.
Yeah.
Your soul needed food.
Yeah.
I do think a baby's cry is one of the most primal sounds in the world, and you should sample it. I think that would be an interesting
I think
experience.
we've talked
have?
about it actually.
Yeah, it's a powerful sound. It's a sonic boom.
And yeah, we're just in a very so I guess
Yeah, anyway, back to the real
music,
talk.
mental health, like
Yeah.
I became very much more aware of that relationship.
Mm.
And it's, you know, this is my experience only, and I just want to like disclaim this because this is not scientific, it's just anecdotal. But for me, in what I do with my band, I kind of have like this weird, uncomfortable relationship with, I don't think you have to be depressed to make good art,
This is a really important topic. Yeah.
but I tend to make better art when I'm depressed.
yeah, this
Not because you need to be, just because it's like, it's a raw connection to what I'm trying to process.
I feel like your veil is thinner to your innards.
Yeah, I
Like,
think
yeah.
so. You're just more in touch, like, with empathy
Yeah.
and just the sort of meat grinder that life can be. And so I think that, like, it's a dangerous misconception to sell to kids this, like, Rimbaud, Baudelaire, Charles Bukowski, doomed artist, like I have to like fucking push myself to the 27 club kind of thing. Like that's bullshit.
Word.
But emotion is also like, you know, the conduit is art. So it's like I found the last couple of years to be very creatively productive and simultaneously pretty unhappy.
What? It's been a time, hey. It's been a time for
Yeah.
everyone. And I feel like in the last few years, especially with what everyone went through during the pandemic and the loss of, I guess, for me, drugs and alcohol are anesthesia. They're soothing, they're putting a kind of a barrier between your emotions and yourself and running away from emotions. But a lot of people, and then there's healthy ways to do that. There's healthy ways to make you feel good. But I feel like during the pandemic, everyone got cut off from all the healthy ones, the
Yeah.
healthy ways to connect. We stopped being able to connect.
Yeah.
So a lot of people lost themselves. A lot of people lost themselves to drugs and alcohol and to
Yeah, I know a
addiction.
lot of-
And yeah, a lot of people. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of.
I mean,
yeah.
it makes sense. You're like trapped in your house. If you're like, for us, it's like, okay, am I in a band anymore? Like, are there going to be shows? Like, I'm
Is
going to
it
write
real?
this music. Like, what is the end game for that? Do I get to share it with people in the way that I'm used to sharing it anymore? I don't, you know.
It's kind of huge, especially when it's been your life for so long.
Yeah. So, I mean, go ahead. I don't want
I have to say, you've got a song called DSMV.
Yeah.
About if anyone doesn't know, the Diagnostic, Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
Yeah.
Now, nice shout out, but like, you know, the lyrical content's like mortality, pleasure, last night. What's the link and why did you call it that? And what is is it the mental disorder of pleasure? And
Well,
yeah.
For me, the first, like, I'm an addict. First
time.
line of that song is once, never enough. But, you know, like, and it doesn't have to be drugs.
No.
It can be any, you know.
Addict behavior is
Yeah,
addict behavior. Yeah.
For me, like, I have obsessive compulsive disorder, which in certain ways is like very beneficial for me in terms of like creative
I was going to say,
output.
you guys have detail. There's
You
a lot
know?
of detail-oriented
So,
nature to health.
but then like in like negative destructive thoughts, it's really not good. So I think that like we've always looked at song titles, like sometimes if it feels right, we will title a song like from a lyric, like in a much more traditional kind of way.
Totally.
But then, you know, if you look at like how like Nirvana song titles are like often Dada-esque, and it's just a fucking cool non sequitur thing.
Lithium.
Yeah, we'll do.
Which is kind of mental health
Yeah.
related. Yeah.
We'll do that kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
And so DSM-5, I think there was, you know, the chorus content of it is about cosmic meaninglessness, and that's something that like, just existential dread is something that that was like sort of my first real experience with like being aware that I was not able to control like a intrusive and negative thought. And so,
Which is scary.
Yeah.
Hands off the driver's seat.
Yeah, you feel like you could lose control of your
100%.
mind.
Yeah,
so, and I think part of it, a big thing was that like referencing it with John, he didn't know what it was. And I know what it is because I've done plenty of things to try to understand myself.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of like, trust me, like, because I know our fans.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, so I felt like just calling a song that would be like a secret handshake to a lot of people that understand, you know?
It was to me.
Yeah, I mean, and there's obviously people that don't know what that is, but I have felt like since we released that record and that song, that there's like a lot of people that like will just ask me like, why did you call it that? Which one are you? Like what, you know, I kind of.
We're a club.
And that was sort of, you know, but everybody's in that fucking club.
I know, right?
Know
It's not exclusive. And it's funny, it's like to belong to that club, you have to tick a bunch of boxes. It's such a funny thing that becomes your life. Like I have bipolar, and for me, it's like having a co-pilot. Sometimes it takes the wheel.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't, but it's always there. It's just a little friend. Yeah, OCD must be interesting. Like, do you ever get stuck on? Do you ever get? Yeah, but like, but for people like I don't know what it's like. Do you ever get stuck on a good loop? Obsessive on a mute, like.
So I didn't realize it until I was older. I'm monomaniacal in most things. So it's
what does that mean?
Like I get obsessed with things. It's not, I can have like obsessive thoughts or actions.
Yep.
That's more the like when they put OCD in a movie, you know, like turn the fucking light switches kind of thing.
Yep.
Sort of paint by number, but it can be pure obsessional, which is where it's just in your mind.
Wild.
But for me, the relationship to that with things is like if I get interested in something, I'll be incredibly interested in that thing almost exclusively, which is, you know, what is like the highest form of, there's a German saying that like the bliss is pure concentration kind of thing.
I think it is. It's what's presence, right?
Like, so if I get interested in like, you know, I'll be like, oh, I'm reading about the Civil War. So it's like, I'll read like fucking like 10,000 pages of books about the Civil War for like 3 years, and then I'll just move on.
How does it work with video game universes? Like with the video game?
I don't play video games.
You don't play? No, but like the music you've made for film and for visuals, or is that kind of out of
What do you mean in terms of how does it work? I mean, I write the music.
Do you get obsessed in there, or?
Oh yeah, with making music, I constantly get obsessed.
I'm saying like you get like.
When it's for someone else, it's a little bit less. Like it's hard to get as obsessed because you have this like job relationship where like you get notes and and you're like trying to do your best for them.
Totally.
You know, but I mean, I guess what I'm saying is there's ways that like I could have like an intrusive thought that's there like all the time, and to me it's very tied. It's very tied to anxiety.
Yep.
So I didn't really experience so much depression until I started getting older.
That's interesting.
Which is very fucking scary.
What?
Because I'm sure we've all had this experience of like you look at your parents or something, or you're like, it's like Christmas and your aunt and uncle are there, and you're like, man, getting old sucks. But like, at least you like got your shit together, and then you start getting old, and you're like, no, you don't. You don't have your shit together at all. You're just fucking old. So it's like.
I think doing something that's meaningful keeps you young.
Yeah,
I think there's something really profound about it. I feel like what makes a lot of people get old is giving up.
I mean, it's an interesting thing for me, especially recently, because like our band is sort of having this. I don't even know if I can use the word renaissance, but we're having this.
It is having a renaissance.
We're having this moment.
Yeah.
And I'm like still not very happy, and that's a scary thing.
It totally
like
is.
I'm very happy, and I'm very gratified, and thankful. But in terms of my quality of life, like day to day, I'm still
It hasn't actually affected
pretty
your inner
miserable,
world.
you
Yeah, it
know?
hasn't actually affected, yeah.
And it really makes you, and you hear that, it's like, it's a trite thing, but it's like, it's really realizing like that notion of that we always are betting on tomorrow. And it's like, when I get my bipolar figured out, or
It's gonna be fine.
when I stop having insomnia, and then I get the right partner, or I do whatever thing, it's like, when I move to the right apartment, and you're like, dude, this is it.
This is it.
So you need to kind of learn that.
It's like your inner world stuff. Like I had this like moment recently where Shame FM got really turned up to the point where it kind of drowned out my brain. And I was like, okay, I have to actually change everything in that nothing matters more than the way I talk to myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing matters as much as that. And it is completely transmogrifying my entire world. Because I'm like, it really doesn't, this is all an illusion.
Yeah.
And it's a weird world. Like it's a weird time to be alive. And I know you've talked about like the apocalypse and cataclysmic things. And I feel like with what's happening in the world, like it's never felt like the end was on the horizon. Like we're probably about the same age. And it's like, I feel like the world was a lot more optimistic when I was younger.
So it's an interesting thing because I had one interviewer ask, people have been pretty adept at pointing out, like, hey, do you think part of why you guys are enjoying this sort of like later career arc success is that you've always sort of seemed like you were making music for some sort of dystopian universe or future, and then now it just is that? And I was like, yeah, I think that does have something to do with it. I think that there's like, people are resonating with the fact that things seem, it's such a complicated thing to unpack, because a more cynical part of me or a more analytical part would be, a big part of that is the way that our news cycle works and how addicted to our devices that we are.
Yes,
because
and it's terrifying.
The truth of the matter is that most of the earth has been fucked all the time, and people that are in developed countries just don't pay attention to it. Like during COVID, I had a kid, you know, and it's like you're reading about how many people are going to die of COVID, and it's mostly older people, and then you look at the statistics and you're like, more kids die in sub-Saharan Africa of fucking diarrhea from not having water every year than
wild.
died of COVID. And it just happens in Africa, and like nobody pays attention. And I had like a little baby.
Yeah.
And so just that, one mental health thing that I've been dealing with is like, I've just been having like this weird issues with regulating empathy. Like, you know, like if you're in an airport and you see all the people, and then if you have this thing where you see someone and you pass someone on the street, and if you're going through a difficult time and you see someone who seems to be functional, you project onto them, why can't I be like that? They look like they're fine. They're just having lunch with their friends. They're just doing whatever thing.
I know exactly what you mean.
And you have no idea what their life is actually like.
Yeah.
And everybody undergoes so much preference, frustration, and fear, and tragedy, just in every ordinary life.
Word.
It's like if I get around a lot of people all at once, I feel like
you
if
lose
there was like a
awareness of that?
snapshot of all of the pain that they're all trying to regulate, it's like totally overwhelming to be around people.
Yes.
You know? So I had that, like, so in answer to your,
What did I ask you?
well, the world is fucked.
Yeah.
But then part of it, it's like, it's always fucked.
It's always in your head.
And then now we just like, we know how fucked it is in Palestine because people have phones. But then it's not just because we have our phones, like all the companies, and I'm not a conspiracy theory guy. One thing I hate about all the conspiracy theorists is like, they're all ignoring the one like obvious conspiracy theory is that like big tech actually did take over our lives.
100%.
And it's like, you should care about issues, but they want you to look at your phone the whole time. So it's like,
And be caught in a dopamine loop.
it's hard to know if things are as bad as they are, but at the same time, it's like, we have multiple huge destabilizing conflicts that could lead to,
Shit going down.
yeah, I mean, we're in a different place. It's a
Yeah.
very like,
I feel like in the 90s, like being a kid, like it felt very optimistic about the 21st century.
I think people that grew up in the 90s, I mean, people from, especially, like I can talk about America, but I think that Australia and America have
Oh
a lot
yeah,
of
you
similarities.
culturally colonized us. I've watched 1,000,000 times more American television and music by about an astonishing degree.
And just stability-wise,
yeah,
I
we're
think,
similar countries,
Yeah.
and we have similar spirits and similar
and I think
attitudes.
that I've remarked multiple times that I feel more comfortable in Australia than like if I go to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Because it's more like
place
California
is grim.
and the West Coast.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just very different, you know?
Yeah.
So, but I think that there was a snapshot where, yeah, it was pretty optimistic.
Yeah, 100%. Like
You
for a
know?
moment, like just for a moment.
I mean, and then like on top of all that, Trump, all this crazy shit, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine.
shit's wild.
There's the, like, perhaps the biggest thing is like at the bottom of the page and it's like, oh yeah, the climate of the earth is irreparably fucked and we're not going to be able to live here. But there's like, Donald Trump said this and you're like, I know, but what about the melting ice caps?
It's so distorted. It's like sometimes like managing your mental health in the onslaught of information. I read something great and I think it's really true. It said, in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. It's just a choice a lot of people are fucking making.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. And so we got to try and like get through it. And I think art is a healing thing. I feel like there's something, it's a weird thing where art is unifying and it's also completely singular. Like everyone who listens to your music gets something different out of it.
I mean, that's why music is so,
It's so great.
yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
vagueness of it.
How did you get into it? How did you start making music? Were you a writer? Like, did you write poems and garbage like that, or?
I can't remember the genesis moment of me. I was very young, like
Yeah.
to where I just had a different relationship with to music and I don't come from an artistic family or a musical background. Like no one and I just had that monomania
Yeah.
thing started pretty early. So I would just be like obsessed with punk rock, and then obsessed with literature, and then certain movies, and then like I got very obsessed with skateboarding, and so then I stopped even playing music. But like when I learned to play guitar, I learned to play guitar in a very compressed amount of time
Yeah, right.
when I was young, and then I just like started skateboarding, and I was like, don't have time for that. I'm just gonna only skateboard and only think about skateboarding, and then I came back to it. So I think when I started earnestly trying to, I never really was like the kind of person who learned to play other people's songs.
It's hard, hey. Well, I mean, it doesn't feel right. It's really interesting. There are two schools of thought in terms of being able to be a cover, like, because so many people learn from covers.
Well, and if you want to be, I'm not much of a musician in terms of
Yeah.
facility
I
with
mean,
an instrument.
You're good at it.
I'm okay.
I mean, you're pretty.
But I mean, like,
He's pretty good.
but
eh?
like, but virtuosity is not a.
Yeah, but
The majority of music, in my opinion, of music that I like is mostly governed by aesthetic choices and not virtuosity with your instrument. I think if you're virtuosic at
Aesthetic.
an instrument, you have a completely different relationship with it.
is it aesthetic and emotional timbre, or is it? Would you say that's just like choices?
I mean, it's really hard. Yeah,
Is
it's
it
like
more
taste.
choices? Yeah,
And
taste.
taste is like
Yeah.
totally subjective.
Were you a goth?
Goth adjacent, but the thing is like, when you're come from it, now everything is like exists all at the same time.
I know, right? It used to be tribal, man.
Because the internet
yeah,
is like,
the monoculture.
yeah, when you read Slaughterhouse-Five, the aliens perceive time like non-linearly, so they see everything all at once. That's how kids see taste and fashion and music eras now.
Yeah.
They're all just on the internet simultaneously coming in and out of space-time. For us, it was like, okay, The Cure is cool, but I'll kick your ass for dressing like that if you go to the skate park. So you're like, okay, I guess I'm not a goth, even though I like punk rock, and goth is an outshoot of punk rock.
It's a universe.
There's like a post-punk family tree, and it's like over here's industrial, and here's goth, and here's it's like.
Industrial is, yeah, it was definitely my first love, and I kind of think it's interesting. Like, I always think about like the inner worlds of people. Like, I think of like, was it Downwards? I'm trying to think. I'm just like blanking. I can't remember whether it was Downward Spiral or Pretty Hate Machine. One of them, Trent Reznor, had no place to live.
I think that was probably Pretty Hate Machine
I think it
because
was,
Downward
yeah.
Spiral is when you lived in the Tate Mansion.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always think you can kind of feel that he didn't have anywhere to live. Do you think people need to be? You did a Nine Inch Nails song.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it was a really weird time because that was like full on lockdown. So when we did the song, it was like we were all in LA and we would get on the phone and we were all in different
sucks.
studios.
That sucks hard.
But overall, pandemic, pretty negative thing. For us, it kind of worked out.
You made a lot of amazing music.
And then also, like, we just did all this collaborative music, and there was certain...
You've done heaps of crazy stuff. Like,
Well, the Nine Inch Nails thing could have
Yeah.
never happened if it hadn't been for COVID.
really?
Because they're so busy. You know what I mean?
Oh, you're
I sent him
You got a window.
I sent him an email, and I was like, okay, nobody's scoring any more movies because they shot all the movies, and there's no fucking tours.
I like your opportunistic approach.
So, well, it's just kind of like that would be the time to do it, and we also didn't want to make a health record like without being able to see each other. And I had a super high risk father-in-law and a infant child, so it's not
Jesus.
like I was gonna be like, whatever, dude, I'm sure it's fine. Like I can't bring
No,
that back.
100%.
So I really
Yeah.
had to stay home.
So it worked out.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you were so productive in this time.
Like I said, I don't think there was any other way for me to do it.
Which collaboration kind of, have any of your collaborations changed the way you went back into music?
I think all of them.
All of them.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. For example?
It's just like when you write collaboratively, one of the best parts about it is that no matter what, this sounds reductive, but you're never going to do anything that you're not going to do. You can only do what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And when you bring someone in, all those things we're talking about, the things that you resonate with musically, when it comes to another musical artist, like they have their whole life that brought them to that moment, and all their responses to melody and how they hear rhythmic vocal lines or whatever. And it's like, I can try to not succumb to whatever tropes that I am
But you're
naturalistically
going to.
inclined to, but I can't not be me.
Yeah.
And when you write a song with someone else, you actually literally get to introduce this thing that is not you, and it changes your perspective on the song.
Yeah.
And all of those, to me, that's the way I think of, like, I didn't learn to play a million cover songs like a lot of kids who like want to woodshed on guitar.
Yep.
But I worked with tons of other musicians and sort of sponged up
Interesting.
that, like, oh, we don't have to do that, because you can.
Yeah.
We're real lovers and students of music, so we're always listening to other artists and getting inspired.
Yeah.
But when you work directly with someone, it changes that dynamic.
What's an example of one that really changed you?
Well, I mean,
You guys have done some huge ones.
the Nine Inch
Yeah,
Nails
some-
one
yeah,
was extremely.
yeah.
So for me personally,
I
like,
think that's how I found you.
I just have this. We did this song with an artist called Shoo Shoo,
Yep.
which is someone I grew up listening. He's very underground, and
Too cool for us.
I just love his records.
Yeah.
And so that one was just really surreal for me, similar to the way that the Nine Inch Nails one, even though one's like a icon, and the other one is relatively
A little
underground.
heart, a little heart of yours.
But both of them were strange because it was like I was having a conversation with someone who I'd been listening to since I was very young.
that
and
must
so-
be wild, hey.
Yeah, and I knew Trent, so it wasn't, and he's
Well, you
very,
guys toured together
yeah,
and
and
stuff,
he's very
yeah.
easy to talk to and everything.
Yeah.
So when we kind of had the idea, it was like, oh, that's fine. The part that was surreal is when he sent the first pass of like, we sent something, he sent something back, and he was singing on it. And I was like, oh, that's that voice that I've been listening to since I was 11.
Wild.
So that part was,
Dude, that's so mad.
that was different than just talking about.
Yeah.
So
That's
that
kinda
one was a pretty
special.
big one.
It's a good time. How would you define mental health?
In terms of like a
Just a
OED
concept.
kind of
A concept. OED, what does OED stand for?
Oxford English Dictionary.
Yeah, I would actually like you. I'd like you to find it in an Oxford English Dictionary way. Yeah.
I mean, I guess in the nuts and bolts of it is just the state of well-being of your mind and your emotions, rather than just your physicality. However, I do think that is a misnomer. Is mental health it's all holistic. There is
100%.
no. I'm going to tell people who are listening. It's like, once you exhaust drugs and alcohol, having fun and shit like that, you got to start meditating and trying all this other crap. Nothing else works anymore.
You need new solution. You need new solution.
And one of them is, kind of accepting that everything is all, consciousness is a holistic unification of like our body and our mind don't
Word.
exist separately of each other.
Yep.
And,
we're all the same
and
soup.
the illusion of self and all that shit. Good luck.
That was a nice, lighthearted final question. Thank you. This is Jake. This is from Health. This is Occupy the Void. Good day to you.
This is an experience of the void.